Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Hey Sister. Hey Sister, how are you?
Hey, sister, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Traveling a little bit this morning, getting back here to Phoenix. So, other than that, I'm good. How about yourself?
I can't complain. It has been a day of rest and restoration. I got up and did a good workout this morning,
Oh,
facilitated a Sunday
good.
school lesson, and yeah, did a few things this morning. Um,
I'm going to
but
change this lighting again. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
what you doing, girl?
Because I,
Hey Jody, thank you for being a loyal watcher and tuning in to say hey sister as soon as we turn the hour. And we also want to say to happy incorporation day. So today, January 29th, is Alpha Kappa Alpha's Incorporation Day, the day in which the organization became an organization into perpetuity. Um, and so to you, Jody, and any other of our sorority sisters who might be watching, happy Incorporation Day. It
yes.
is important. Why incorporation is important um, for all of us. And even as we're moving in the space and the time that we are in as African American or Black or Americans of African descent, however you want to describe yourself, incorporation is important because ownership is important. And there was a time in our history where we were denied ownership. We were denied our own agency over our lives, over our bodies, over our stories and experiences. And it's not that far in the recent history of this country that those rights were still denied to us. So I would say on this Incorporation Day for Alpha Kappa Alpha, that if you can own something, think about ownership. Think about taking ownership, whether it's land, whether it's an organization, whether it's a business, um, property, real estate, whatever it is. We should be thinking about ownership. And that's why on today, when I think about Incorporation Day, what it means to me is that we as a people need to think about ownership. I don't know what it means to you, sister.
I think that number one, it means that I always think of the women who actually were responsible for getting the organization incorporated. And if you know how it is right now today as a woman trying to get a business started, the things you have to think about in terms of, filing your paperwork, getting, having someone help you prepare your taxes, getting EIN numbers, just the whole getting a logo. It's there. It runs the gamut. And so to think that these young women who were just out of college had the foresight to think that
One generation out of enslavement.
one generation out of enslavement, right out of college, again at the time only about 1,000 um, black people or people of African descent had been educated at the time of 1908. So here, just a few years later, um, this you know it speaks volumes about the work that was
Mhm.
put into ensuring that there would be something. Talk about building a legacy. That certainly, like you said, being forward thinking in that way. The other thing that it makes me think of is the value of intellectual property.
Mm.
Sometimes, we I remember many years ago, I heard this statement analogy about thoughts being energy. And it was that, thoughts are energy and it's flowing between each of us. That's why sometimes you'll have an idea and then you'll hear something on television or see something and somebody else has a very similar idea and you're like, man, I thought of that same thing. So it's about that flow and exchange of energy and through your thoughts. I think that we often see people doing a lot of the same things, in different ways, and those little small nuances is what make the difference. Whether it's writing a script for a movie, or creating an organization, an international organization, those small nuances really make a difference. So I think that it's important to think about the value of your intellectual property and make sure you do all the things that you should do in order to maintain your intellectual property. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we don't have the resources um, to hire attorneys and different things like that. But I would definitely say, as much as you can, protect your intellectual property.
Make the investment. It
Make-
is worthwhile to make the
Yes.
investment. So, well, thank you for that indulgence as we talked a little bit about incorporation. We would like you to like, follow, share, subscribe, tell people about Hey Sister and why you come back and tune in, whether you tune in live or you watch it in the replay or you find it where you find your favorite podcast. We also want you to join the conversation in the comments as we are live this evening. That's where the action happens, in the comments. But this evening, we're going to talk about a very sobering topic, and that is about Mr. Tyree Nichols and the tragic death of this young man at the hands of police officers. As I have done this entire weekend, and why I could have a weekend of rest and restoration, I stayed away from the news. I stayed off of Instagram scrolling. I didn't want to inadvertently even come across the video of his torture, of his beating, and of him losing his life. As much as I tried to avoid watching what happened to George Floyd, because I still would turn the TV on or turn the news on, I eventually saw it. And I didn't want to put that into my spirit or in my psyche. Based on what I heard from the reports about how awful it was going to be, there was no desire in me to seek it out. And I would just say, we have a problem. We have a problem. There are so many levels and layers of the problems that we have, right? We're going to talk about policing, and we are putting out an open invitation and an open call. So if you all know someone who is a police officer, we would like to bring them on, who is in law enforcement on any level. We would love to bring them on, Hey Sister, to have the conversation about where we are in this country with policing, with, as they say, safety or crime mitigation. Like, where are we really in this country? We would love to have them on. So please send them our way. We want to have them on. And we'll put in our email so that you can email us, and we want to bring them on. So we're going to talk about that. But one of the issues, or one of the problems I think we have, a part of our sickness as a society right now, is trauma porn, trauma bonding, that we're literally seeking traumatic experiences to have something to connect to another human being about. So whether it's seeking out this video of watching someone being beaten to death, that's a big problem. I don't know, sister. What do you think about that? Because so many people, and I saw the DJ D Nice, he posted on Instagram how he inadvertently, scrolling through Instagram, came across the video, and didn't, you start watching something, you don't know what you're watching when you first start, and he ended up watching it. And I just refused. That's why I stayed off. I don't know. I see a comment here. Let's see. I watched and really wished I had not. Still trying to get it out of my head. Absolutely. And that's why I didn't want to even put it into my head. And I saw some people post the pictures of his artwork or of him skateboarding and different things like that. But just having said the news that I did watch before the video was released to the public of his mother and father speaking, that was enough for me. Attorney Ben Crump speaking, that was enough for me. I don't know, sister. What say you?
Well, like you, I thought I was trying to avoid it, but ultimately it became a topic of conversation across every network, not just from a news perspective, but even from a sports perspective. So, obviously this weekend you had some championship games in the NFL, you had some basketball games in the NBA, and the Memphis Grizzlies played, they made statements, different things to that effect. So even in the commentary on some of the sports news shows, this topic came up. So let me start by saying, and again, I'm looking at the spelling of his last name. So you know that speaks volumes to me, considering that we are related to Nichols family, with that same spelling.
Mm-hmm.
But so let me begin by saying, yes, I too tried to avoid it. I have read different people's perspectives about sharing of the video. So on the one hand, I read, for example, Sean King saying that he initially said he wasn't going to share it. Then he came back and said he was, because the family asked that it be shared, that others see it, other officers see it, and hopefully it would lead to some reforms and some changes. But then to be honest, Sean King is problematic for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw somebody else say, particularly for non-black creators, content creators, they didn't want them to share it. And they were like, basically, it doesn't matter what Sean King says, as an ally, right? Or as someone who believes in doing the work, to fight anti-blackness. By continuing to share this, you're doing exactly what you said. It's participating tangentially in the trauma porn of it all, or the trauma bonding of it all. And I think it's hard, right? It's hard to say what is the better, which school of thought one would fall into. Because on the one hand, what we learned from George Floyd's death is that it seemed like it didn't matter how many times we said these things were happening, until people saw it for themselves. Some folks just didn't believe it. They
Mm-hmm.
just simply could not fathom, because their experiences with police officers is one thing. They could not fathom that the things we had been saying were actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, you have people who are, now in this case, this was body cam footage.
Mm-hmm.
So, some people are recording these things because they genuinely feel like no one, this is their only recourse if something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the body camera footage obviously is a part of what we've asked police and police departments to do, to try to change how they police people of color, specifically Black men. And so once it becomes available to the public, I know I'm on the fence about what you do with that information. It's traumatic to see it play out over and over again, whether it's on social media, excuse me, or on the nightly news. But again, if some people don't see it, they just don't believe it from us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's it, and so it's so many layers, right? And I'm sure we'll dissect some of them about, what does this say about race relations and the impact of racism in policing, because there will always be those that say, well, they were black police officers, and miss the point that we don't want to be killed, period. Like, no matter the color of the police officer. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I don't want to be killed by anyone. I would just
Mm-hmm.
like to die a natural death. And you know, so those are the kind of things that, for this young man to be 29 years old, I loved seeing him in with the skateboarding, like you said, with his photography. I love seeing those aspects of him. um I knew something was different about this young man, and so to learn that he had Crohn's disease and was only like 140 pounds, um to your point, that adds to the trauma. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put a pin in it right there, because there's some other thoughts that I have. But yeah, it just adds to the trauma to think that he was 140 pounds. And I think at the smallest, the police officers were like 200 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, making you think about the young man McLean. Oh, I can't think of his name.
Oh, yes, in
Elijah McLean.
Elijah
That was
McClain in
mm-hmm.
Denver area, the
Yeah,
Denver area. Oh, no,
yeah,
Aurora.
yeah.
Mhm.
Making us harken back to him. You're tuned in live now to Hey Sister, and we are having a conversation, a sobering conversation about the murder at the hand of police officers of Mr. Tyree Nichols, and the different layers of the conversation. If you know a police officer or someone in law enforcement, we want to invite them to join us on Hey Sister, because we would love to have them. Even if we could do a panel, it would be great to have this type of conversation about where we are with policing in this country. And so that's kind of where I wanted to kind of go to next in the conversation about policing in America. Um, so one of the things is very interesting. I saw this. There is so many things. um, because there was another officer. There was a white officer on the scene who's not charged, not been fired, but who also participated.
Hmm.
And I think in the tasing. Um, So I'll put a pin in that because I don't have enough information to dive deeper into that piece of it. But I find this very interesting. Um, we all, not we all, let me stop saying we all. What history shows us is that policing in America is deeply rooted in our racist history and or slave patrols and or governing, policing, controlling of black bodies, black people, our movement, and what have you. Um, there's evidence to show that. Um, and so there is a through line always in this country because there are police everywhere, right? If you go to any country, there's a police force. But there's a through line of the impact and the history of race in policing in this country that I don't think we talk about enough. And interestingly enough, the 1619 project is airing on Hulu. The first two episodes drop. And one of the things about that project is they talk about the through line, that thread that connects a lot of what we see in experience in today's and contemporary times to that of the historical legacy. And so Some might question and ask, well, but they were Black police officers.
Hmm.
And all I would say is there were Black overseers.
Hmm.
There were Black men on slave patrols. So that's all I can say on that. I don't know, sister. What say you about that part?
So I wanted to, we talked alluded to this earlier. So Mark Lamont Hill posted a quote that is attributed to James Baldwin, and it says James Baldwin on Black cops. Black policemen were another matter. We used to say, if you must call a policeman, for we hardly ever did, for God's sake, try to make sure it's a white one. A Black policeman could completely demolish you. He knew far more about you than a white policeman could, and you were without defenses before this Black brother in uniform, whose entire reason for breathing seemed to be his hope to offer proof that, though he was Black, he was not Black like you. And so I found that to be a very interesting quote. Now, obviously, um, calling the police can be problematic, whether they're white or Black, or
Mm-hmm.
Asian or Latino or what have you. Um, and my issue is not with police officers, but my issue is that we live in a society that we can pretty much condemn a lot of people when they don't do their jobs well. But when we condemn police officers, we always hear the rhetoric of there are always bad apples. There are a few bad apples. And so it always comes, for me, comes up, well, why aren't the good apples speaking up more
Mm-hmm.
than the apples are acting out? And
Mm-hmm.
so, does it in this case make a difference that they are Black police officers? To some degree, sure, yeah, it does. Not because it made it any less vicious or violent that a Black unarmed man lost his life in a traffic stop. And we have to that needs to be next. Let's talk about traffic stops. But it's because, to your point, it's the question of when does, and this is what I would really like to ask a police officer. So again, would love to have some officers on to have a very honest and direct conversation. When does the brotherhood of blue or blueness supersede the brotherhood and the manhood of Blackness? I don't i don't understand how, if these same men were not in uniform and they were driving, they could get stopped by a police and treated in the very same way. So, what was it? This young, frail man, what was it in them that made them choose to hurt, harm, and ultimately kill him in the way that they did?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that you don't want to, you want to prove that you're less and less like Black like us? I'm that's what's so hard for me in this in this conversation. That's what's really hard for me, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, this was another Black man. This was someone who could have been your brother, your cousin, your uncle. This was somebody who was defensive. Yeah, he got up and ran. I too would have ran. When somebody is 100 yards, I'm just like, Lord, I just wish his mama had heard him calling her
Mm-hmm.
name,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like 100 yards from home and you're calling for your mother. What in us would participate in that level of mob
Brutality.
brutality and mob mentality and mob behavior? So so is it problematic when it happens for when a white police officer or Hispanic police officer takes the life of an unarmed Black civilian? Yes. It is absolutely problematic, but as you alluded to, it's deeply rooted in enslavement and the slave patrols. So, at what point, though, do Black men put the badge before their Blackness and not see this young man as a human being who just very basically somebody who, again,
Just
could
trying to
be
get home.
just trying to get home
Hmm.
and reckless. And again, we'll put a pin in this traffic stop stuff, but traffic stops cannot be the way we die.
Hmm.
It's just,
Yeah.
it can't be. So I think it is. I think it poses a different problem, but it is definitely a problem when brothers can't see. And I know folks is going through mental health crises across this country that are not being discussed, but
Well,
it's okay. I'm sorry.
I dropped another quote in from James Baldwin, and I think this one is so very poignant. In Harlem, Negro policemen are feared more than whites, for they have more to prove and fewer ways to prove it. And one of the questions Rosalind posed here in the comments, is it a blue brotherhood initiation? I don't know if it's a blue. So if you have not watched, and we talked about it, I think very briefly last year, there's a documentary on PBS called Hazing,
Mhm.
and it talks about hazing. And it's not just in fraternal organizations, although the person who did the documentary is a member of Omega Psi Phi, and a few of the police officers in this instance are members of that same organization. But what they do talk about in that documentary is the culture of hazing in America, period. So when you ask the question, is it part of Blue Brotherhood initiation? Maybe it is, because there is hazing in the police force. There is hazing in the military. There is hazing in bands. There is hazing. This initiation, you have to prove yourself to belong. And how many other ways do you have to prove yourself? And so, as the James Baldwin quote alluded to, those Black officers have fewer ways of proving themselves, right? Other than by being extra hard, going hard in the paint, and really not recognizing the humanity of their brother in that moment. At least that's one of the things I had. Um, Another comment here, they are part of a special task force set up in 2022 to police the community for drugs. We could do a whole episode on drugs and the war on drugs. And what the war on drugs has produced for us is over incarceration, over police, over criminalization, and mostly of Black and Brown people. We have another comment here. As a Latino, it is not uncommon for other Latinos to be our own harshest critics and for some reason treat ourselves horribly. We all need to treat our fellow men and women as equals, regardless of our background, period. Thank you so much, Jaime, for saying that, because I think that is part of the challenge for us as people of color, having true having tried to and made our best efforts in assimilating into this culture, is that some of the our own ways and own ways of being culturally were lost because you had to do it this way and you had to fit this way. So that means we were harder, tougher on each other. I don't know. That's one thought.
Well, speaking of that through line, racism, colonialism, um, patriarchy, all of the things. I'm no world history scholar, right? But I what I'm particularly, to Jaime's point, what is particularly devastating to me is that in all of these years, in all of the generations since, enslavement here in the United States, again, different countries, it invading other countries,
Mm-hmm.
and basically stripping people of their humanity, of their language, of their culture, again, even taking their lives. I am dumbfounded by the fact that colorism and other oppressive tactics seem to have grabbed a hold of us in the Black and brown communities in a way that, and all communities of color, let me say it like that, all communities of color, they have oppression, and this colorism and all of these things seem to have grabbed a hold to us in a way that I often wonder, why are we continuing to carry the water,
Mm-hmm.
right, of the oppressor? Why are we doing that work? I often wonder, we have targets on our backs all the time, just trying to navigate in society. Why are we carrying the water? Why did these brothers feel the need to carry the water on that particular day? Jody alluded to this special task force, and I heard Attorney Ben Crump speaking and saying that just a few days earlier, another gentleman had called for, and he had been stopped by the same unit, had been harassed, and I believe attacked as well. He called in internal investigation, or in the internal affairs unit, or what have you. Of course, they said they would look into it, and they didn't do it. I want to say he said it was 3 days earlier, but don't quote me on that. But the point was, he asked the question: had the internal affairs unit stepped in, would Tyree Nichols still be alive? Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
we don't know that answer, but it sounds like this specific unit, like now, of course. Oh, I heard them say one police officer through his attorney is devastated. You should have been devastated at that moment, because I'm not really sure how you allowed yourself to be in that space. And like you said, we don't want to watch. So to be there and actually participate, I wish you had been devastated in that moment enough to tell your brothers to stop, to
Mm-hmm.
render aid, to not wait 20 minutes or whatever the time frame was before this young man was actually given help.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like this particular task force was problematic for a while, and there should have been some better oversight. And so when we talk about overall policing in America, I genuinely cannot wrap my brain around the fact that I am still paying tax dollars, and I don't feel like I'm able to call the police for actual
Mm-hmm.
protection.
Mm-hmm.
That we all are, hardworking, tax-paying citizens who, have a little piece of property. We trying to keep our homes and our yards nice and do different things. And if you have a family member who has a mental health break, and you call for assistance, and they end up dead, or if you have a situation where a party might get a little loud, right? And somebody else calls,
Mm-hmm.
or even if you're walking in your neighborhood and they feel like you don't belong in that neighborhood, and so somebody calls to question why you're there. All of these things, it really, I am at the point of, so what do we do now? Because we
Mm-hmm.
are tax-paying citizens, and the fact that we cannot rely on police forces across the country to protect us in the way they're supposed to, what do we do next?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not enough. Thoughts and prayers have run out. Um, you know, writing letters to condemn behavior has run out. Um, we see the protest in the streets, yes, but we still know, I still get phone calls asking for me to donate money to various police organizations. When do we when are we able to take our power back in these situations? Now, obviously, I believe that we need law enforcement, right?
Mhm.
So it's not like I'm saying, oh, do away with policing, but it I cannot wrap my brain around the fact that this man went to a dance studio. 67 years old, I believe it is. Um, or I can't remember if that he was 67 and the other one 72. I don't know because I got them confused. But went to a dance studio, opened fire, shot 10 or 11 people, killed at least, I think, 5, 7, maybe. I don't remember the numbers exactly. And he was apprehended. Now, you know he killed somebody. You know
Mhm.
you were on the lookout for somebody who was armed and dangerous. He was apprehended without a problem. But then you have a 29-year-old, 140-pound young man who skateboards, who is beaten to death because he supposedly was driving recklessly. And then they tried to claim, oh, he was trying to grab for my gun. And then that drove me crazy too. Like, you're going to add insult to injury, like literal injury. You're going to add insult to it by suggesting that he tried to grab for your gun as if this camera footage wasn't rolling. So I'm what is our recourse? That's what,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I want to throw one of the things you said, a question out to the folks who are watching now. And if you watch this later in the replay, would love to still have you add in the comments. Um, do you feel safe calling your local law enforcement? Do you feel safe or protected in reaching out to your local law enforcement if you have a dispute with your neighbor, if you are in a situation where you are lost and may need help or assistance, or you may have a vehicle breakdown, or you may, any number of situations, right? Where, or you have a loved one who might be going through a crisis. Do you feel safe and comfortable reaching out to the police? I would love to hear y'all drop y'all comments down um, as we kind of go on because we talked about the traffic stops, but before we get to the traffic stops, because this special task force was about drugs, why are we still fighting the war on drugs?
Hmm.
Why are we still fighting the war on drugs?
Well,
Because I
I'm
mean, it's in some communities, it's considered a health issue at this point. But in our neighborhoods or in neighborhoods where there is a large number of black and brown people, it's still a criminal pursuit and not a healthcare pursuit.
mhm, mhm.
So why are we still fighting this war on drugs?
Well, so so first, let me just say something. I want to be very clear here. So, our conversation here is not intended to demonize again police officers.
No.
Um, I think that, my personal opinion, like teachers, like firefighters, I think public servants should be paid much more than they're paid currently. Um, but I also think the requirements to be a public servant should be much higher than they are now. Um, I, I think that we have continued. So I just want to put that out there. Put a period. Okay. Now, why are we still fighting the war on drugs? I think we're still fighting it because this was never a real war. It was never actually identified, right? So, in other words, when you go to war, whether you use faulty information or not, you should have some sort of defined objective. You want to get in, you want to do certain things, and then you want to get out. And you want to have as few casualties as possible. And
Mm-hmm.
you want to ensure that if at any point that, well, and that you're constantly looking at the data and seeing, are you making the type of progress towards the objective that you wanted to? If you're
Mm-hmm.
not, then you need to pull your troops out. There needs to be strategy to go into war. There was no strategy from the beginning. The war on drugs, in my opinion, was very much created, fabricated. We know what traditionally, as far as the crack epidemic, what ultimately became the epidemic, what started with flooding of cocaine in black neighborhoods, it was largely due to arms deals that were happening, that were structured and created by U.S. government officials.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't fight a war that we don't even have definition about.
Mm-hmm.
It was never a real war. It was only meant to, like you said, criminalize people of color, particularly black youth in poor neighborhoods, in order to ultimately,
Feed the prison industrial complex and privatize prisons. I mean, that's a whole nother
well,
conversation.
yeah, but
Yeah,
that's the business, right? That's
it
the
is a
business of
business.
it all, and people don't like to talk about that. We like to believe that we're better than that, but we're not. We have proven that enslaving people is was good business, not good business, but big business. Let me say that. Now
It's
that enslavement
lucrative.
lucrative. Thank you for a better word. It was lucrative. Now that same enslavement is happening from a prison industrial complex. It's a lucrative business. And so they had to create this imaginary war to suggest that war on drugs, to suggest that to keep wealthy people wealthy, to keep certain politicians in their positions, for folks to say, I'm tough on crime. You see all
Mhm.
the things that I did, I'm tough on crime. And we have that whole political brainwashing that goes on. And it's largely based on fear mongering as well.
Mhm.
So uh
It is. It has been a very, very long war.
yes.
Um, and yeah, it's very interesting. We got some comments, and I do want to share these
Hmm.
about follow up. So, Jody writes that she does not feel safe. She had a drunk man knocking on her door and was trying to get into her house. He was at the wrong house. She calls the police. The deputy finally arrived. He didn't ask to see her security footage, didn't ask how she was. The men in the neighborhood scared the guy off. He went two doors down. Um,
Deputy
Deputy
Martell, that's what she
Martell,
said.
yeah, Deputy Martell said there was nothing he could do. He showed up with an attitude. He didn't introduce himself. I had to ask for his name. Let's see, we have another comment here. It says, it depends where I am. Where I live, my neighborhood is small and mostly elderly, and I guess they periodically come through. But this entire situation, I'm so puzzled. Not sure why these cops, the crew, were going what they were going through to be so cruel and heartless. Jody says next time she'll grab her friend out of the nightstand. Tremaine says police officers come through. So yes, absolutely. Police officers, email us because we would love to have you on to have a conversation from your perspective. Because as my sister said, we we don't necessarily value our police officers. We don't value our teachers. There are people who are working and hardworking in these professions. We need detectives. We need people who are keeping order, as they say. I hate that damn term, law and order. But when
Except for
we
the television show.
Except, but when we go out in public spaces, we want to feel safe. We want to feel protected. But at this point, you you think about Uvalde. Um, those police officers, they didn't act. They were frozen, they were paralyzed. And you see the dance studio, you see all these other places in which public safety is clearly, police are not even doing public safety. And is it because they're being called to do mental health wellness checks and they shouldn't be doing mental health wellness checks? Or
Right.
is it because they're doing too many damn traffic stops? So why so many damn traffic stops? You know, that go awry. Philando Castile is another prime example of an inane traffic stop that should have been, here's your ticket, go on your way. But they asked the question, do you have weapon? Yes, I do have a weapon and I'm licensed to carry this weapon. And then what happens? He gets shot. Right? So why are these so many traffics? I don't even understand. And this is the thing, that one of the things that I fear the most of having a young son in his 20s that is a driver, is about a potential traffic stop that could go sideways,
Mm-hmm.
because they can use anything for probable cause, and something in which you should get a ticket then ends up with you being arrested and or hospitalized. Why so many traffic stops? um I don't know. What do you what and what's interesting is that and my husband travels internationally often, and he talks about, in many places in Europe, they don't stop people for speeding. They
Right.
don't even stop people from speeding. They have the cameras capture you, they send you the ticket. Like, that is something that's off their plate. So I don't know why so many traffic stops.
So I was trying to, and I'm sorry now. This is terrible. This was a bad idea, I guess, going to this one. But I was trying to pull up this story because I had just heard this other story, which has not obviously gotten a lot of um well, not to me, hasn't. I hadn't heard much about it. But it was from it's the former Temple police officer, Temple, Texas, accused of shooting and killing 28-year-old Michael Dean during a traffic stop in 2019. Carmen de Cruz reportedly shot Dean in the head while reaching in his vehicle to grab the keys. So, in other words, this father whose daughter was having a birthday, he went to the grocery store to buy her a cake, ultimately was pulled over. The officer parked in such a way to block him in. um from what I've read, got out of the car with his gun drawn, went up to the vehicle, had the gun in, I guess, one hand, and then asked the man for his keys. The gentleman went to give him his keys. When he grabbed the keys, I'm gonna hope that it wasn't purposeful. He squeezed the trigger and ultimately shot and killed this man. We know, and the young man's name is escaping me. A few years ago, the young man who was stopped, in the white woman officer who pulled out the gun. She was saying taser, 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 but pulled out her
Mhm.
gun ultimately. Why so many traffic stops? So number one, I think all of us we all grew up being told that during certain times of the month or during certain uh, events, the police are out. And we always, and the running joke, I guess, back then was, oh, they're trying to make their quota, right? So there is this perception, at least, whether true or false, but usually where there's smoke, there's fire. There's this perception that police officers are required to stop so many people, write so many tickets, et cetera, in order to meet some quota. At the end of the day, um, there was a whole nother conversation about we were having on social media about AI,
Mm-hmm.
artificial intelligence, not Allen Iverson, um, and we know that even with AI, there's problems, right?
As
But
bias, there's implicit bias.
there,
Absolutely.
absolutely. But I'm like, okay, my VIN number is associated to my vehicle, which is registered to me. I have a driver's license that has my name on it, that has likely lots of information clearly in that strip because they use it for all kind of identification purposes. I have a plate on the back of my car that shows that I've registered. At this point in time, and we have cameras everywhere. And again, you talked about your experience coming back through customs with global
Customs.
entry. They had face recognized you before you even finished putting your information on
Hadn't
out
even
your
made
mouth.
it up to the little kiosk to put my passport. They were like, Demetria. I was like, wait a minute, y'all. Wait, how that happened? What? Yeah.
So we are in a place where we have enough technology that really and truly traffic stops kind of can be rendered um
Obsolete.
somewhat obsolete. Now, mind you, if someone is driving erratically, right, speeding, uh like egregiously speeding, there are definitely things and times when traffic stops are warranted. But if you're saying like you're pulling, if something would normally result in a ticket, just send me the ticket.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't even have to have a conversation because I don't know about anybody else, but in full candor, if I see a police officer behind me, I tense up.
Mm-hmm.
If you tense up, your driving probably may change. You may, jerk your wheel a little bit. Is that going to be deemed erratic driving? You may get paranoid and forget to turn on a signal. Some of the things that people have been stopped for, again, we think of Sandra Bland
Mm-hmm.
and what she was pulled over for. It's like that literally should have just been a ticket. And it shouldn't matter if I have a problem. It shouldn't matter if, when I say problem, it shouldn't matter if I have an attitude. The young man who was just killed in Los Angeles, well, he was tased multiple times and ultimately died. Um, he had had an accident. So, of course, we demonize him immediately by saying, oh, well, they found cocaine and cannabis in his system. But back up, he had a car accident. I have lived in Los Angeles. I have had car accidents in Los Angeles. The police do nothing but exchange your information with the other driver. That's it. Until you pull over. Please get out of the way because you blocking traffic. So this young man was acting erratically or had some other things going on, but he was apologizing. He was obviously scared. Something else was going on there. So, again, why are these things, these traffic stops, things that typically, this is not what a police officer would typically do? Why are they escalating to the point of death? It does not make sense. We have too much technology available to us for, I would say, a pretty significant portion of these sort of stops to be eliminated. I really feel like we
Yeah.
should have, by now, we have enough. I mean, our parents get tickets all the time. They don't even know because they just mail them to them.
Right. We have a couple comments here I want to share. One, Tremaine talks about she was at Publix the other day and the DeKalb County officers were out in the hood greeting people. She grew up in a small town in New Jersey and knew all the police officers, but they also knew the town over was very, very racist and they had to be cautious. Rosalind says that San Diego is the same way with traffic accidents. Um, Jaime says, I literally freeze in the driver's side when I get stopped with my two hands on the wheel at 10 and 2 position. And that is something that we do not, I hate, I despise despise when I hear on these camera, these dash cams or these body cam videos. Well, why are you nervous? Bitch, because you just stopped me. Like, I mean, it is a normal human reaction. Fear is a normal human emotion. If you are stopped, if you're in a situation where you find yourself uncomfortable and you know, your emotions get high and your fight or flight hormones are kicking in and firing off, all of that is normal. And I want to know, why have we take not normalize normal human behavior, normal biochemistry,
Right.
right? This is our biochemistry. Fight or flight is gonna fight, flight, or freeze is gonna kick in. And if you're stopped and you're nervous and it's the dead of night, why are you nervous? Well, where are you going? That's the one that gets me. Like, that's the one. I remember being stopped. It's been a few years ago and I was almost home and I just crossed from the Osceola to the Orange County line. You're speeding. Man, you see what time of night it is, and I'm a single woman in a car by myself. Is all what's going on in my head. I'm trying to get home. So you look at my license, you see my address, you know that I'm not far from, you know that I am like 2 blocks away from turning into my neighborhood. And all I could do was just, yes, no, okay, just get, thank you, and then went on my way. Because, as you said, no ounce of humanity. Like, even where are you going? Why you where I'm going? You got my driver's license. You can see where I'm going because I'm in a direction headed to my house.
Well,
It's
even
like all logic, all just humanity goes out. I don't know what the training is, but
clearly.
why are you nervous? Because I just got stopped by the damn police. What you think?
Well, and that's the thing. So you said biology is, this is why I'm saying I definitely think public servants should be paid more, but I think the requirements for them being public servants should be higher. Maybe they need to be required to take biology classes. Maybe they need to be required to take psychology classes, or human, some sort of behavioral classes, because human behavioral classes, because another one is, I live obviously in the Phoenix area. We know that it can get up to 122 degrees or more, but I think 122 is the highest that I've experienced since being here in the summertime. A few years ago, there was a little girl who went in the store with her family. They went into a little dollar store. She picked up a doll. And when she walked out, her parents, they walked out. She walked out with the doll in her hand. I don't think they meant anything malicious, but to see them throw the mother and father like on the ground and on the top of a heart. If you put my face on a stove and it's
Mm-hmm.
on, guess what? I'm going to wince. I'm going to jump. So to tell somebody you put them on top of a hot car in 120 something degree heat and
And
tell
say,
them not
don't
to
move.
move. How does that work? How does that work? Like you said, fight, flight, or freeze. Going back to Tyree Nichols, at one point he got up and he did what he knew to do to try to save his life, and he ran,
Mm-hmm.
and they still caught up to him. They caught him and continued to abuse him.
Mm-hmm.
That is that's a level of sickness and
Depravity.
depravity and sadisticness that just does not, it does not come from who I believe we are at our highest selves. And I
Mhm.
think to Jaime's point earlier, and you and I, and we talked about it in our Sunday school class, I just don't think we see the God in other people.
Mm.
I just don't. I don't think we look at other people and we see divinity. We don't see a creation that is meant to be here to serve a purpose,
To share the space.
to share the space.
Hmm.
The When we get to a place in our society and it looks like we're creeping closer and closer and closer by the day, we're snuffing out a human life. Is something that people like, a few weeks ago they were talking about this rapper 21 Savage being on a Clubhouse call, and him and his friends, he got in an argument with somebody who joined the Clubhouse, and they were talking about all the people that they had killed. Now, considering all these rappers on trial right now for gun charges and a mess, um and I'm like, wow, you got to be morally bankrupt to think
Hmm.
that that's like, that's a good thing, like that's a thing for us to continue to, yeah, anytime you think that snuffing out another human being's life, even when
Don't
you
say snuffing out. Killing.
killing, yeah,
Murdering.
murdering another human being, another one of God's creations, is like the flex. It's certainly like, again, as the young people would say, it is not the flex that you think it is. That is sick and that is sad. Even in the situations, if you had to defend yourself and your family, I'm not gonna tell people, because one of my friends and I had a conversation this many years ago. He says the Bible doesn't say thou shalt not kill, it says thou shalt not murder. And that's different. Sometimes in self-defense you might kill somebody, but to murder a person is a very different thing.
Mhm.
But even if you kill somebody in self-defense, if you never think about it afterwards, if it don't do something to you,
Your
what does that,
spirit, yeah.
to your spirit, what does that say about us? What does that say about us?
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, I just don't know how. Um, so I'm hoping. So one suggestion that I heard was having a different dedicated line. So instead of 911 for emergencies, there be a dedicated phone number for mental health emergencies only, and then that way, hopefully, a mental health professional can come out. But again, maybe this training that we've talked about training, and we've talked about unconscious bias training, we've talked about um DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion training, we talked about having sensitivity training. Maybe they don't need none of that. Maybe they just need to go and have some biology classes, understanding some the psychology and the biology of what happens to the human body when it is afraid, and we have reason to be afraid.
Hmm.
This is historical. We have reason to be afraid. We have reasons for our adrenaline to rush. And
Hmm.
to your point, if I get pulled over, if I'm a female driving alone,
Hmm.
remember when they used to tell us to go to a well-lit area and pull over? Now
Hmm.
you have police officers who literally harass women and men, but women who seek to go to that well-lit place in order to protect their safety and their children.
Hmm.
So, and to make it home.
Right.
So to your point, like
What are the
you don't,
rules of engagement?
yeah.
Because they have a handbook that they don't share with the citizens clearly. But what are the rules of engagement? It would be nice to have rules of engagement. I do think some of the what Tremaine, the comment she made about And there's data that shows that, community policing works, and where people are out in the neighborhoods, where they're talking to people on a regular basis, where they're getting to know the people, and that people who are in that neighborhood, from that neighborhood, um, are a part of the neighborhood, or a part and integrated into the community, where it makes a difference. It makes a difference in overall public safety. It makes a difference in even the ability to solve crimes when they
Mhm.
happen in a much more swift manner, where people can feel like justice is being served and not just us being served. So there are all of these elements. There's a lot of things that we know. There evidence to show what works, but what we 100% unequivocally can say is that any routine traffic stop should not end in someone's death. Period. Any routine traffic stop should not end in brutally beating, because this was a, like, just pull out a gun and shoot somebody.
Mhm.
This was a brutal beating. Any routine traffic stop is not worth either of our lives. So, Mr. Police Officer, do me a favor and do yourself a favor.
Right. Because that's the other part of it, right? Any routine traffic stop, we're not just talking about the lives of the person who is driving the vehicle. If you are a police officer, you want to make it home to your family too.
Number
It is
two.
not worth it for, I don't want them to pull out a gun on you because they feel their fight, flight, or freeze, their fight tells them to pull out a gun. I don't want that to happen to you. But likewise, I want to make it home to my family
Yeah,
too.
I don't
So
want you, and you don't have to walk up. Well, what's wrong? Why are you doing this? It's like the aggression, like automatically off top. You stop somebody and you go from 0 to 10. And
right,
when you at 10, then I'm coming at 20.
right.
Right? And it's a bad situation all around. So I know we're at our time. And so once again, I would say that we would love to have some law enforcement on to have this conversation. You can email us here at this email address, and we will schedule to bring someone on. If you're not in law enforcement or a police officer, but you work in a prosecutor's office, even, we would love to have you on. I will say, though, that one of the things I do appreciate about this situation that happened in Memphis is that they're not at home on administrative leave, that they were fired. And it did not take a year. It did not take 18 months, 14 months, like in the Laquan McDonald case in Chicago, that it happened within 20 days. And so, whatever scrutiny that will come upon the Memphis police force, and I think everyone has a certain level of scrutiny they can get. I do appreciate the fact that they were swift to move, not only with determination by the police force, the police union also condemning their action, as well as the prosecutors bringing charges. And we didn't have to sit and wait months for charges to be brought. So if that's progress, I think we'll have to take that progress. So rest in heaven, Mr. Tyree Nichols. And truly, condolences and prayers to his family as they continue this long journey of seeking justice, and hopefully coming to a place where they have the peace that surpasses all understanding, and knowing that he lived and his purpose here may have been served. So, yeah. Um, Sister, what do you want to say in closing?
I think you said it. Mr. Tyree Nichols's life was not in vain, and even though we are weary, we're very tired. Saying another name, adding to the list of long hashtags, I will say that I believe that we will see some changes happen, even if it's just in Memphis. if that's where it starts, let's just like make sure that's not where it ends. I love that, Jaime, but coming up out of I'm in Phoenix, and there was a woman police chief, and unfortunately she resigned because there were a lot of things, gangs and things happening under her watch too. So I more than women police chiefs, I need people who are responsible, who have a level of humanity, and who understand that if we are going to be better, we need to see the divinity in each other. So that's what I have
All
to say.
right. Well, I'm just going to throw this quote up here, what our dad always said: there are no simple solutions to complex problems. This is a complex problem. And we hope to be part of the solution by having these conversations on Hey Sister. So thank you for tuning in tonight. And um, please join us in the conversation next week. Good night, everybody.
Be safe out there.